Hi, so speaking as I am at the moment on Monday, the 10th of December, tomorrow, the 11th of December, is supposed to be, or was supposed to be, the date when MPs would finish debating the terms of the Brexit deal and would then vote to say whether they accepted it or not. So the Prime Minister, Theresa May, has today said that that vote is now not going to go ahead tomorrow, throwing the whole process into some doubt. Now, just go through the reasons, first of all, why she decided to delay it. Now, simply because, as she said herself, it was not going to be passed, and in fact, it was going to suffer a massive defeat. It's quite weird when I was watching the video of her announcing this, because there were a couple of things she said which drew laughter from the House. I'm guessing mostly from the opposition benches. In fact, if anything, when I watched the government benches, the Conservative benches in particular, backbenchers, there was a lot of silence, and there wasn't really, because sometimes when you get the opposition jeering or laughing or whatever, then the other side of the House sort of responds. It was very quiet from that point of view. So she said about the debates that's been going on for the past few days that she'd been listening. That drew the first round of laughter. And to say that the agreement had, the deal, I should say, had broad agreement, where another round of laughter. But she said what seems to be the sticking point is the backstop. And of course, this is the sticking point, just to bring people up to speed. I mean, I did a video just explaining why the Ireland issue is really a deal breaker when it comes to any form of Brexit where we leave the customs union. If we leave the EU without leaving the customs union, then that's okay. But of course, a lot of Brexiteers are saying, oh no, we want to leave the customs union, even though we didn't technically vote for that. But everyone, including the Prime Minister, is taking that to mean that we should leave the customs union, which is really weird, but there you go. So, the scenario is as follows. If we accept this deal, the backstop originally said to prevent the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland becoming a hard border, that it would enter into a customs union until they could move out of the customs union without creating a hard border. So in other words, they had to come up with a plan. Now, this isn't a case of implementing something that'll take a while. For example, one of the things we've got to do during any transitionary period is arrange for trade deals with various countries, including the EU, because when we leave the EU, we technically won't have any. So this transition period sort of keeps us in that customs union, so our trade treaties as they are now. The problem is that other people have is that it means during this period we can't negotiate with other countries, we can't form trade deals because it's just as we are now in the EU. So it's all very messy from that point of view, and we can potentially be in it for indefinitely. And the reason is we can't move out of it until we deal with the Northern Ireland situation. And given that no one has come up with a plan for it, like there's quite a lot of Brexiteers have said, oh yeah, the solution's simple. What is it then? What is the solution? The nearest anyone came to offering a solution was Boris Johnson saying, oh, we'll just use technology. Okay, great. What technology? No one has come up with a system whereby there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which is a central pillar of the Good Friday Agreement as part of the peace process there. That means if all the people who can currently implement plans in the last 2 years have not been able to come up with a plan, then the chances of them being able to come up with it anytime soon are pretty much nil. Let's be honest, nil. No one has come up with a plan so far. Why should they be able to in the next few years? So the backstop could roll on indefinitely. So what Theresa May said, okay, well, we'll change it a little bit. So the whole backstop, instead of applying just to Northern Ireland, because that is bang out of order from the point of view of Northern Ireland politicians, and indeed many in the wider UK, because what it would effectively do is keep Northern Ireland in the customs union, but the rest of the UK would not be. Great Britain would not be, which means you effectively put a border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and Great Britain, which is also part of the UK. That is totally unacceptable to the likes of the DUP, who are the Northern Ireland Party, who are propping up Theresa May's government. So they would obviously vote against this deal. So the alternative is put the backstop across the whole of the UK, but that is also unacceptable to an awful lot of people. She simply can't get this deal through Parliament. She doesn't have enough numbers. Even if she ordered every single one of her MPs, the Conservative MPs, to vote for it, and there's at least 80 that would definitely not, even if ordered to. But if everyone did it, it won't go through. It still can't go through. She hasn't got the numbers. If every single opposition MP, votes against it, as they are very likely to do, and we know the DUP will, then that's it. It's sunk. But in reality, as I say, there are at least 80 Conservative MPs who would also vote against it. I don't think there are very many. There are maybe a few, but there are very few people on the opposition benches that would vote for it. There are maybe a few Labour MPs that would, I think. And there are independent MPs who don't belong to a party. They can vote as they believe their constituents would wish them to. But either way, she's not getting it through. So what are the alternatives now facing her? Before I sort of go through some of those, I decided to have a look at the European Withdrawal Act. So this is the Act of Parliament that was drawn up earlier this year, which basically sets Brexit in law. And this is the provision that talks about this specific period of time where we've got some sort of arrangement agreed with the EU and it has to get approval by Parliament. Parliament insisted that it was able to approve a deal. The government initially did not want to do this. But of course, Parliament said, no, you're doing this. We are going to approve any deal you come up with. Because otherwise she could have just put it in and that would have been it. So it says the withdrawal agreement may be ratified only if a Minister of the Crown has laid before each House of Parliament, that's the House of Commons and the House of Lords, a statement that political agreement has been reached, a copy of the negotiated withdrawal agreement and a copy of the framework for future relationship. Political agreement has not been reached because the United Kingdom Parliament has not approved it. I mean, they haven't been given a chance to approve it, but we know what the result is. Theresa May says she knows what the result is, and I believe her. So what this provision does, it goes through, it's very boring, as all these acts are. What has to happen now? So the government basically has to say what its intentions are, yada, yada, yada. The curious thing is, if you look through this whole document, there isn't really mention of a date. It doesn't even mention the 29th of March 2019 as being the end date. It refers to the end date, the date we leave Brexit, but it doesn't give it as an actual date. So perhaps when they were drawing it up, they were already at that time thinking to themselves, there may come a time where we may have to ask the EU if we can extend it, which is possible. If all sides agree, that I don't think there's any reason why that can't happen. In fact, there was a judgment today by the European Court that said that UK has the unilateral right to cancel Brexit. Now, lots of people won't be happy about that. Obviously, the government can't just cancel Brexit. There would have to be another referendum. More of that later. But even the EU states would be thinking, and I know they've already said this would be really annoying if we do, because obviously, they didn't want us to leave in the first place. But the idea that a country can trigger Article 50 in order to trigger negotiations to try and get themselves a better deal, and then just before it's kick-out time, cancel the whole thing, that'd be really annoying. But although it's really annoying, the European Court has said it's perfectly legal. So we could, let's say we all decided we want to stay in after all, then we could actually just say, do you know what, we're cancelling it. And that'd be fine. We wouldn't have to get agreement with the rest of the EU. It would just be done. And the whole Brexit process would be thrown in the bin. But the other thing they did mention as part of that judgment, and this isn't a judgment itself, it's just something they mentioned, they sort of implied about potentially the end date being extended. Because I was wondering, I hadn't actually looked this up, I have to confess. There's nothing in here, obviously, about extending it, but then it's nothing to do with UK law, this is EU law. Because Article 50 sets out that when you trigger it, you get 2 years to sort yourself out. And I didn't know if there's anything in that specifies that it must be 2 years and no more, or if there is the option to extend it. So it does sound like, legally speaking, if the EU agreed that we would be able to say, look, you know what, we triggered it too early, which we did. That was a big failure on Theresa May's part, triggering it too early. We triggered it too early. 2 years, it's not enough time. We're not ready, are we? It's a shambles. We're not ready. Can we extend it another 6 months or something like that? So that's possible. That is a possible, result as from this. I can't get my words out at the moment. So anyway, that's the European Withdrawal Act. So we know that there's a certain process laid down in law for what has to happen if there's no agreement made. There's a particular date even mentioned in it. So the 21st of January 2019, if at that point the Prime Minister makes a statement that that there is no agreement, then again there's a bit of a process whereby the government then has to say what its intentions are going forwards. By that time, of course, there is no time to get another agreement, because in terms of alternatives, there's some MPs are saying we need to renegotiate a better deal. Theresa May has made it clear there is no possibility of a deal without the backstop. Now, that is true. That is absolutely true. Without the backstop, without something that because at the moment, there is no way of preventing the hard border if we leave the EU as things stand. That's not possible at all. Someone has to come up with a plan to make it possible, if indeed there is any solution to this problem. So alternatives are that she lets everyone go off for Christmas, they come back, and she goes through the process of renegotiating with the EU, comes back with basically the same deal because the EU have already said, well, this is it. And to be honest, even though there's other aspects of the deal which in theory, maybe if the EU blink first, we could improve on, so it's worth doing, the backstop is still going to be there. That's still going to be a thing. And if that's what's stopping people voting in favour of it, and for a lot of people it is, remember, for the DUP, that is absolutely what would stop them. Let's think about how she could get the, 320 votes she needs, because there are 650 MPs in theory, but only 639 of them are going to get a vote. There's a Northern Ireland party, Sinn Féin, who have seats, but they never take them up at Westminster, which means they never vote at Westminster, even though they've got the right to. And there's a couple of other MPs that don't vote either for various reasons. So realistically, there's 639 votes up for grabs. So to win a majority, you need 320 of them. She doesn't have 320. We know that there's going to be 80 Tory MPs who want to sink the whole process and want the no... Well, they say they want the no deal. I query this. I think that a lot of these MPs who say they want a no deal at all and WTO rules, because they know it's if that happened, within a month, everyone would see the catastrophe. It's unavoidable. And obviously they would then be blamed. I don't think they actually want that. I think they just want to say that that's what they want, knowing full well that the majority of Parliament are responsible enough never to allow that to happen. That way, whatever does happen, and any form of Brexit is bad, they can say, well, of course it's bad. You didn't go for the no deal like we said you did. So I think that's, a political move there. But nonetheless, they are going to torpedo this deal, even if she leaves it till after Christmas and comes back and says, look, this is what we've got. Vote for it or not. So she's not going to have their support. She's not going to have Labour support, which is the main opposition party, because ultimately, whether they like the deal or not, and they do not like the deal, I don't blame them, it's a crap deal. Whether they want that deal or not, they want a general election. They want it to fail so that they can try and trigger a new general election. That's what they want. In terms of other opposition parties, they don't want this deal either. So they're not. You might get the odd rebel that will vote for it, but it's not enough. So she has zero chance of getting this deal through, because there are aspects of this deal that I understand are essential. They're crap for us because any form of Brexit is crap for us. But I understand why they're essential. And people saying, oh, well, it's not essential at all. Yes, it is. Otherwise, come up with a solution to prevent it. Come up with a solution that means we don't need the backstop. Because no one has. No one. So that's one alternative. But it will still fail. It will still lose. So then what you're looking at, you're facing a no-deal Brexit. That can't happen. So the only other alternative is, quite frankly, as a lot of people campaign for, a people's vote. Another referendum that's a bit better this time. Instead of just, do you want to be in the EU or out of the EU, that actually asks the questions a bit better. But also now, people have sort of seen through a lot of the lies. They know that they were lied to when, they voted leave. And bear in mind, the Brexiteers who are going, oh, you'll be killing democracy if there's another blah, 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 if Brexit doesn't go ahead. It's absolute nonsense for several reasons. First of all, they're carrying on as if it was an overwhelming majority. It was not. A minority of the population voted to leave the EU. A minority voted to remain. And it was a smaller minority that voted to remain. Therefore, leave won. Fine. But this idea of killing democracy by offering another referendum, how is offering a referendum killing democracy? It's very democratic. It's based on the idea that people can change their minds. That's why we have general elections. We don't elect an MP in, and the MPs aren't voted in once for life. They get voted in every few years because we might change our mind. And in fact, that's another point we could also say in terms of the democratic process, because since the referendum, there has been another national vote, the general election. We had a general election. And in it, people got to choose who they wanted to represent them in this important Brexit process. Everyone knew, going to the polls for that general election, that they were voting for their MPs to deliver the Brexit they wanted. Had a totally free hand. You knew which politicians were in favour of Brexit, which ones were in favour of remaining in the EU, and yet the vast majority of the House of Commons, if they were given a free vote, and not tied to the referendum or anything like that, they would vote to remain in the EU. The majority of people in the Commons want to remain in the EU. So that means people voted for a majority of members of Parliament to be wanting very close alignment with the EU, preferably in it, but if not in it, very closely aligned. So this idea that a few very loud people are saying that we mustn't have alignment at all, no, because people voted those MPs in. Yes, they also voted some MPs in who don't want that alignment, but they're in the minority. They just happen to be very loud. So it's not killing democracy. Democracy has already said, well, we want these MPs who are actually in favour of alignment with Europe. We might not want to be in the EU, but we want to be, closely tied to them. So, and then the other thing to point out, just in terms of the people's vote, was actually quite hilarious. There was a bit of a protest organised to campaign for a people's vote. 700,000 people attended it. Then there was another one, a counter one, where some people thought, right, we need to prove that there's even more people in favour of leaving. 3,000 people turned up to that. That's quite spectacular, isn't it? So a referendum surely is the only sensible option. That being said, the government seems to be dead against it, and the Labour leadership also doesn't seem to be keen on it. So although there's a lot of people calling for it, and although Theresa May says she's been listening, and she didn't just say listening to the debate in Parliament, but listening outside as well, are they really? So where are we going to go? So quickly running through those options again. She puts it in front of Parliament at some point. Parliament votes for the deal, and then we've got the deal. Or either she puts it in front of Parliament and it gets voted down, or she just decides that, look, it's never going to get voted through. We can't use this deal. The deal is gone in the bin. Forget it, because it's never going to get accepted. So then you go no deal. No deal means, chaos, absolute chaos. For example, a lot of our trade comes in through ports at Dover. Dover will come to a complete standstill. The reason being that at the moment there's free movement. There's random samples, and I was listening to a guy who was talking about it, who works there, who knows how the process works. So what about 1% randomly checked? So it basically takes about 8 minutes to get through, they were saying. And if this comes in, and it's at capacity, that's the important thing, it's at capacity. So at this point, it's not 1% going to be checked, it's 100% of everything, because that's the nature of the border there. If you don't want free movement, then you have to check who's coming into your country. Now, if we're up to capacity checking 1% of the people that come in, how are we going to cope with 100%? And I talked about this months ago, saying the fact that we are not actually even expanding our border forces, services. We're not expanding them at all. We're not recruiting more people. We're not expanding the facilities there. We're doing nothing to prepare for a no deal, because that's what would be needed for a no deal. Consequence being that those trucks would be stuck there for days. Now, that means food coming in, obviously that's going to spoil. Drivers aren't going to want to do that run. That's what this guy was saying. I wouldn't know that, but that's what he was saying. Works in the industry. He was saying those drivers are not going to go for the UK run. They'll say, well, send me to Belgium or somewhere like that. They won't be doing with it because there'll be too much. And it's not like you can just say, oh, we'll just go to a different port or something like that. Not only is that further round, but every port in the country is as large as it needs to be for the freight coming in. We don't have lots of slack anywhere. You know, our ports are as large as they need to be, and there's as what they've been needing to be for quite a while now, for many years, is just large enough to do a few random samples. Essentially, people can come and go with minimal checks, and now it's going to have to be heavier checks, hard border. So it will be complete chaos. There will not just be, and some people think, oh, prices go up a little bit. Well, for a start, you're knackering all the, as Theresa May calls them, jams, just about managing families who are, you know, like that. They suddenly drop below the breadline. And it's not just a case of that. The reason why prices would go up is because of shortages. So some people wouldn't be able to get access to the things we now take for granted. It's that simple. So the no deal is not an option. MPs are not going to allow a no deal. So if there can't be an agreement and they can't negotiate an agreement that everyone will go for, and as I say, as Theresa May said, and I'll totally back her up on this one, without the backstop, you know, there is no deal. There has to be a backstop. But that being said, MPs won't vote it with a backstop. And I'm not saying that the MPs are wrong in this, by the way. The deal is a bad deal. But is it potentially the best deal that we can get leaving the EU? Potentially, because everything is worse than staying in the EU. That's just a fact. But, well, it's an opinion. But it is a fact as well. And then the only other alternative is a referendum, where you basically say to them, look, do you want to stay in the EU because it's all been a shambles? Do you want to leave the EU but stay in the customs union, in which case all these problems are solved? It's just that we're then out of the EU, which means that we don't get a say in the rules and regulations. We have to follow them, but we don't get a say in it. But at least, you know, we've left the EU and we're in the customs union. I mean, that's like what neither side wants, because people who are like myself want to stay in the EU want to say, and people who want to leave don't want to have regulations forced upon us that we don't get a say in. So it doesn't please either people, but it solves all the political problems as well as economic problems. And then the other alternative is that people say they want to leave and they want to leave the customs union. In other words, a no deal. That's what they want. In which case, yes, disaster, but that's what the people will have asked for. In which case, all right. Now, obviously, you don't phrase it as three questions like that because you're going to split the no vote. That's stupid. So what you do is you say, like the first one says, do you want to remain within the EU? Do you want to leave the EU? But then you have another one that says, in the event that we leave the EU, do you want us to remain in the customs union, or do you want us to not make a deal? Because there's no deal possible at this point. You can't just say, have a deal. No deal with the EU, in which case we just leave, hard leave, and follow WTO rules until such time as we can arrange trade agreements with various countries, which will take years. That should be the start choice. And if that was the choice originally, even with all the lies that people believed, there was zero way they would have voted for that latter option. Zero way. Which means we wouldn't be having all this problem now. So it was really come from the incompetent way that the original referendum was posed. But there you go. That sort of brings us up to speed there. Interesting times. I said in the last video, didn't I? If I was a citizen of a different country, I'd be looking on with some interest because, you know, this is proper popcorn stuff. But because I'm living in this country, it's quite scary times. But we'll see how it goes anyway. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content. Comment down below. I'm getting all my words wrong. Too late. I'll see you later.